You were wonderful parents to Sebastian. I just needed you to be wonderful parents to me too.
My name is Amelia Bancroft, and at 32 years old, I never thought I would find myself smiling when I heard my younger brother Sebastian had been arrested. The golden child, the favorite, the one my parents mortgaged their souls to protect while they left me to drown during my divorce and financial collapse just 2 years earlier. The phone rang at 2 in the morning. Mum was sobbing. Dad was yelling in the background. They needed my legal expertise, my money, my help. After a lifetime of being second best, the tables had finally turned. Before I tell you how I responded to my parents' desperate plea for help, take a second to subscribe and comment where you are watching from. Trust me, what happened next changed everything about our family dynamic forever. Growing up in the leafy suburb of Weston Grove, we were the picture-perfect English family, at least from the outside. My father Charles worked as a hospital administrator, and my mother Eleanor taught 3rd grade at the local primary school. We lived in a beautiful red brick house with a sprawling back garden, took summer holidays to Bramwell Bay, and attended church every Sunday. My childhood photo albums show a smiling little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. But photos only tell the story their owners want to preserve. From my earliest memories, my parents set impossibly high expectations. I learned to read before kindergarten, skipped a grade, and was enrolled in every enrichment program my parents could find. Piano lessons on Mondays, advanced maths tutoring on Wednesdays, competitive swimming on weekends. There was no room for failure in the Bancroft household. If I brought home 98%, Dad would ask quite seriously what happened to the other 2%. It was, in hindsight, a rather ridiculous question to ask an 8-year-old, but nobody was laughing at the time. When I was 8 years old, everything changed with the arrival of my baby brother Sebastian. I still remember the day they brought him home from the hospital, a tiny bundle with wispy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. My mother cooed over him for hours, and my father proudly paraded him around to all the neighbors like he'd personally invented the concept of babies. I was excited to be a big sister, naive to how his presence would reshape my entire childhood. The first signs were subtle. My piano recital, marked on the family calendar for months, was suddenly missed because Sebastian had a slight fever. Nothing serious, just a standard infant temperature, but enough that both parents stayed home with him instead of watching me play Beethoven after 3 months of practice. As years passed, the pattern solidified. Sebastian became the undisputed center of our family universe. When he started youth football, my parents never missed a single match, cheering loudly from the sidelines with customized jerseys bearing his face and squad number. Meanwhile, my ballet recitals, debate competitions, and honor society inductions often found me scanning the audience for faces that were rarely there. I compensated by becoming fiercely independent and self-sufficient. While Sebastian had his football boots purchased immediately and his science projects practically completed by my parents, I worked babysitting jobs from age 12 to buy my own school supplies and stayed up late completing assignments alone. I even learned to forge my mother's signature on permission slips when she was too busy helping Sebastian with his homework to sign mine. A skill I am not proud of, but one that would later come in surprisingly handy when I forgot to sign my own gym consent form in university. The year I turned 14, I had qualified for a prestigious national piano competition. After months of preparation, the big day arrived. I put on my nicest dress, arranged my hair carefully, and waited by the door. 10 minutes before we needed to leave, my mother casually mentioned that they would not be attending. Sebastian had a football match that had been rescheduled at the last minute, and they simply could not miss it. I took 3 buses across town alone to play Chopin for a crowd of strangers, won second place, and rode home with my silver trophy on my lap. When I arrived, no one asked how it went. The house was empty. They were still at Sebastian's match. Despite everything, I maintained a desperate hope that my achievements would eventually earn equal love from my parents. I graduated as valedictorian of my school. As I delivered my speech from the podium, I spotted my parents in the crowd. For a brief moment, I saw pride in their eyes. But as soon as the ceremony ended and photographs were taken, The conversation immediately turned to Sebastian's university prospects and football scholarship possibilities, though he was still only in year 10. That evening, as we ate a celebration dinner at my favorite restaurant, a choice I was surprised they had honored, my father raised his glass in a toast. I held my breath, waiting for words of recognition and pride. "Your success reflects well on this family, Amelia," he said. "Now Sebastian can see what hard work looks like." I smiled and clinked my glass against his, swallowing both champagne and disappointment. Even my greatest achievements were measured by their value to my brother. All through school, I nurtured a dream of becoming a barrister. Not just any barrister, but a top-tier solicitor at a prestigious firm, someone who could make a real difference. It was partly driven by genuine interest in justice, but I cannot deny that a significant motivation was to finally make my parents see my worth. I studied for my exams with an almost manic intensity, joined every society that would look good on university applications, and wrote dozens of drafts of my personal statement. When acceptance letters arrived, including one from a renowned law program, my parents gave me a perfunctory congratulations. The same week, Sebastian scored a hat-trick in an ordinary weekend match, and my parents took the entire family out for an extravagant dinner in celebration, presenting him with an expensive new games console as a surprise. The contrast could not have been clearer, but I had grown so accustomed to the disparity that I barely felt the sting anymore. Or at least that is what I told myself as I cried silently in my bedroom that night, acceptance letter clutched in my hand. University should have been my escape, a fresh start away from the shadow of being the lesser-loved child. In many ways it was liberating. I excelled academically, making the dean's list every term and securing coveted internships. Yet the patterns established in childhood proved difficult to break. While Sebastian stumbled through his first attempt at college, my parents paid his full tuition, bought him a car for the commute, and hired tutors when he struggled with basic courses. Meanwhile, they informed me that they could only contribute a small amount towards my education. "I understand that tuition is expensive," my father explained over the phone, "but you are smart enough to figure it out. You have always been so independent." That independence was not a choice but a necessity born from years of emotional neglect. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library, another 15 as a research assistant, and still managed to maintain top marks. During holidays, when other students went home to relax, I picked up seasonal retail jobs to save for the next term's textbooks. In my final year of law school, during a particularly grueling study session for constitutional law, I met Jonathan. He was tall, ambitious, and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had always been supported in his endeavors. When we started dating, he was appalled at how little my parents contributed to my education compared to what his parents had done for him. "Let me guess," he said after meeting them for the first time, "they spoil your brother rotten, right?" I was stunned by his immediate perception of the dynamic I had normalized for so long. Jonathan saw in one dinner what I had spent a lifetime trying to ignore. When I introduced Jonathan to my family, my parents were polite but reserved. They asked perfunctory questions about his background and career plans, then quickly shifted the conversation to Sebastian's latest exploits. By contrast, when Sebastian brought home his girlfriend of 2 weeks the following month, my mother prepared an elaborate meal with all her favorites based on information Sebastian had shared, and my father spent hours showing her family photo albums and telling animated stories. The most painful example of their favoritism came when they missed my law school graduation, an achievement representing 7 years of higher education and countless sacrifices. Sebastian, who had by then dropped out of 3 different colleges, had a football match in an adult recreational league. Not a championship, not a special event, just a regular weekend match in a hobby league for post-college athletes. I have never told anyone how much I cried that night while Jonathan held me and assured me that my accomplishment was extraordinary with or without my parents' acknowledgement. The next day I called them, and my mother casually explained they had wanted to come, but Sebastian would have been so disappointed if they missed his match. The implicit message was clear. His disappointment mattered more than mine. Despite their lackluster support, Jonathan and I got engaged a year after graduation. When we began planning the wedding, new tensions emerged. My parents contributed a fraction of what they could afford, yet attempted to control every decision, from the guest list to the menu. When I selected a venue they deemed too expensive, my mother remarked, "Well, if you had chosen a more practical career path like teaching, you would not have all this student debt limiting your options." The irony that they had fully funded Sebastian's failed attempts at degrees in fields he lost interest in after a single term was apparently lost on them. We had a small but beautiful wedding, with Jonathan's warm and supportive family making up for the emotional absence of mine. My parents attended, of course, maintaining appearances as they always did. They posed for photographs, made appropriate speeches, and then complained about the limited selection at the bar and the unseasonably warm weather that made the outdoor ceremony uncomfortable, a complaint so wonderfully on brand that Jonathan's mother later joked she'd never seen two people so committed to finding a cloud in a clear blue sky. After the wedding, Jonathan and I settled into married life in Weston Grove. I secured a position at a mid-sized firm specializing in corporate law, working punishing hours to establish my career. We bought a small flat, adopted a cat named Justice, which in retrospect might have been tempting fate, and created a life that felt like a refuge from the emotional inequity of my childhood home. I made dutiful calls to my parents every Sunday, visits on major holidays, and sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. Yet each interaction left me emotionally drained, as conversations inevitably centered around Sebastian's latest ventures, his relationships, or my parents' concerns about his direction in life. When Jonathan and I suffered a heartbreaking miscarriage in our third year of marriage, my mother expressed brief sympathy before changing the subject to Sebastian's girlfriend troubles. I ended the call early and sobbed in Jonathan's arms, finally voicing what I had always known but never fully acknowledged. My parents will never love me the way they love him. I will always be an afterthought. It was the first time I had said it aloud, and somehow naming the truth made it both more painful and more liberating. Jonathan suggested I consider therapy to process the years of emotional neglect, but I was not ready. Instead, I threw myself deeper into my career, seeking the validation there that had always been withheld at home. 5 years into our marriage, I was offered a position at a prestigious law firm in Ravenswood, a significant step up in both responsibility and compensation. The decision to move meant leaving Weston Grove, but the opportunity was too valuable to pass up. Jonathan, who worked in financial consulting, was able to transfer to his firm's Ravenswood office, though the move represented a lateral step rather than an advancement for him. We found a beautiful flat in Kensington Row with large windows overlooking the city. The first year was exhilarating. I thrived in the competitive environment of the new firm, quickly establishing myself as someone who could handle complex cases and demanding clients. My salary nearly doubled, and for the first time in my life, I felt financially secure. Meanwhile, Sebastian had embarked on yet another venture, a sports memorabilia business that my parents helped finance with what I later learned was a withdrawal from their retirement fund. When I expressed concern about this during a rare visit home for Christmas, my father dismissed me with a wave of his hand. "Sebastian has tremendous entrepreneurial spirit," he declared proudly. "He just needs the right opportunity to showcase his talents." I bit my tongue, refraining from pointing out that this was the fourth right opportunity they had financed in as many years. As my career accelerated, subtle tensions emerged in my marriage. Jonathan began making comments about my long hours, the work dinners I could not miss, the holidays we had to postpone. 12 days before our 6th anniversary, I came home early, planning to surprise Jonathan with tickets to a concert by his favorite jazz musician. I found him in our bedroom with my colleague Hannah, a junior associate who had joined the firm 3 months earlier. The confrontation that followed was ugly. Jonathan did not deny the affair, but instead turned the blame towards me. I moved into a hotel that night, unable to bear the sight of our flat, the bed, the life we had built together. In a moment of vulnerability, I called my mother. Through tears, I explained what had happened. There was a long pause on the line before my mother responded. "Well, Amelia, marriages take work. Maybe if you had focused more on being a wife than on being a lawyer, things would be different." The victim blaming hit me like a physical blow. The divorce proceedings began 2 weeks later. What I had naively expected to be a straightforward separation became complicated when Jonathan hired an aggressive solicitor who challenged our prenuptial agreement. Then, in a cosmic joke of timing, my flat suffered major water damage from a burst pipe in the unit above. With most of my possessions in storage and ongoing hotel costs draining my savings, I found myself in a financial spiral. Desperate and humbled, I called my father. I explained that I needed a temporary loan, just £18,000, to secure a new flat and cover living expenses until the divorce was settled. "Your mother and I are on a fixed income now, Amelia," he responded with a hint of irritation. "We cannot just bail you out of problems you should have anticipated. You are a grown woman with a good job. Figure it out." 2 days later, my cousin Charlotte called to catch up and mentioned casually that my parents had just given Sebastian £65,000 to expand his struggling business. I thanked her for the call and then threw my phone against the hotel room wall so hard that the screen shattered. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Through it all, my parents remained distant, their calls perfunctory when they happened at all. When his memorabilia business inevitably failed, my parents immediately funded his next idea, a sports-themed pub near Ashby Field. When Christmas arrived, I could not face the prospect of returning home. I spent the holiday alone in my flat, watching old films and drinking too much wine. When my father's 60th birthday approached, I made an effort to reconnect, flying home for the weekend celebration and bringing a thoughtfully selected watch I could barely afford. At the party, I was treated as an afterthought. The breaking point came during dinner when my mother pulled me aside, ostensibly to check in on how I was doing. I made the mistake of being honest, sharing that I was struggling emotionally with the betrayal and loneliness. She sighed heavily, patting my hand in a gesture that felt more dismissive than comforting. "You know, Amelia, if you had tried harder with Jonathan, perhaps been more attentive, more supportive of his needs, things might have turned out differently. Men need to feel appreciated." The statement hit me like a slap. I stood up from the table, hands shaking. "You have never, not once in my entire life, given me the benefit of the doubt or the support you freely give Sebastian," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I have done everything right. I have worked myself to exhaustion to make you proud. I have been independent because I had to be, not because I wanted to be. And still, you find ways to make my pain my fault." I left the party early and changed my flight to that night instead of the following day. On the plane back to Ravenswood, I made a decision that was both terrifying and liberating. I would stop seeking the approval and love that had been withheld for 30 years. I would effectively divorce my parents as I had divorced Jonathan. For the next several months, I declined calls from home, sent brief responses to texts, and made excuses to avoid visits. With the emotional drain of seeking parental approval removed from my life, I found new energy to rebuild. The divorce was finally settled, with Jonathan receiving less than he had demanded but more than he deserved. I approached my work with renewed focus and determination, and my billable hours exceeded targets by 40%, prompting senior partners to take notice. Recognizing that my all-work approach was ultimately unsustainable, I also forced myself to address my emotional health. I found a therapist named Dr. Whitmore, who specialized in family dynamics and parental favoritism. "You have spent your entire life trying to earn love that should have been freely given," Dr. Whitmore observed during one particularly difficult session. The recognition brought me to tears, but also began a process of genuine healing. Slowly, I built a chosen family of friends and colleagues who valued me for exactly who I was. My assistant, Grace, began inviting me to her family gatherings, where her boisterous, endlessly hospitable relatives embraced me without question, though I did have to learn rather quickly and rather painfully that in her family just a small plate meant 3 full courses and a pudding you weren't allowed to refuse. Most significantly, I developed a close relationship with Margaret Sinclair, a senior partner who saw potential in me that I sometimes doubted myself. 58 years old with a reputation for brilliance and brutal honesty, Margaret became the mentor I had always needed. "You have exceptional analytical skills and presence in the courtroom," she told me over coffee, but you work like someone trying to outrun something. Sustainable success requires balance. Under her guidance, I began to approach my career more strategically. When a high-profile case involving corporate fraud allegations against a major pharmaceutical company came in, Margaret recommended me to lead the defense team despite my relatively junior status. The case consumed 6 months of my life but resulted in a favorable settlement that saved our client millions while implementing meaningful compliance reforms. The morning after the settlement was finalized, I arrived at my office to find a handwritten note from Margaret on my desk. "Exceptional work, Amelia. You have earned your place at the table, not by working yourself to death, but by being smarter and more strategic than your opponents. I see great things ahead for you." I framed the note and hung it behind my desk. By my 31st birthday, I had paid off the divorce-related debt and saved enough for a down payment on a small but elegant flat in a building with a doorman and a view of the river. The day I signed the mortgage papers as a single woman using only my own name and credit was one of the proudest moments of my adult life. In this period of rebuilding, I also cautiously re-entered the dating world. After a few forgettable first dates arranged through well-meaning friends, I met Alexander at a charity gala hosted by my firm. A pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and a quick wit, he approached relationships with the same thoughtful intentionality he brought to his medical practice. After dating for 8 months, I finally shared the full story of my family dynamics, expecting the usual uncomfortable sympathy. Instead, Alexander listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and then said something that shifted my perspective. "Your parents' failure to value you properly reflects their limitations, not your worth," he told me, holding my hand across the dinner table. "Their inability to love you as you deserve says everything about them and nothing about you." It was a simple statement but profound in its impact. As my personal and professional life flourished, I received increasingly concerning updates about Sebastian through family channels. There were rumors of gambling debts, 2 drink-driving charges handled quietly with expensive lawyers, and business investors threatening legal action. My parents shielded him from consequences, as they always had, mortgaging their retirement security to protect him from the results of his own choices. By my 32nd birthday, I had created a life that felt authentic and fulfilling. I believed I had finally broken free from the dysfunction of my childhood. I was wrong. The real test of my healing came at 2:15 on a Tuesday morning, when my phone rang with a call from my parents' number. "Amelia." My mother's voice was barely recognizable, high-pitched and breathless with panic. "We need your help. It's Sebastian. He's been arrested." The story spilled out in a chaotic narrative, punctuated by my mother's sobs and my father's angry interjections in the background. Sebastian had been arrested for wire fraud and embezzlement related to his latest business venture, a cryptocurrency investment platform that had apparently been operating as a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. The authorities alleged he had defrauded investors of nearly £2.5 million. "He needs a solicitor, Amelia, a good one. Your father and we put up our house for his bail, but we need help with legal fees. You work at that big firm. You must know people. You have to help us." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old familiar response, the ingrained need to solve problems and earn approval. But alongside it rose a wave of bitter memories. "I'll need to know more details before I can offer any advice," I said carefully. As they answered my questions, a clearer picture emerged. Sebastian had created a company that promised extraordinary returns on cryptocurrency investments, using early investors' money to fund an extravagant lifestyle while attracting new victims with fabricated success stories. My parents had mortgaged their home to post his £600,000 bail, depleting their retirement savings in the process. "Amelia, you have to understand, your father is having chest pains from the stress," my mother said, her voice taking on the manipulative tone I recognized from childhood. "We're still your parents, no matter what disagreements we've had. Family helps family." "I'll need to think about this," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I ended the call with a firm goodbye and sat in the darkness of my bedroom, emotions swirling. Alexander turned on the bedside lamp and studied my face with concern. "Family emergency?" he asked gently. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Family hypocrisy emergency is more accurate. I spent the rest of the night wrestling with the decision, weighing justice against mercy, boundaries against compassion. When morning came, I called Dr. Whitmore and arranged an emergency session during my lunch break. "They have placed you in an impossible position," she observed, "but this is also an opportunity to establish a new dynamic, one based on honesty and appropriate boundaries rather than resentment and capitulation." By the end of the session, I had formulated a plan that honored both my history and my healing. That evening I called my parents back. "I've given your situation a lot of thought," I began. "I am willing to help, but we need to be clear about what that help will look like and what it will require from all of us." I explained that I would provide consultation on Sebastian's legal situation and recommend solicitors who specialized in financial crime, but I would not personally represent him, nor would I provide financial assistance. What I offered instead was my professional guidance, contingent upon all of us, including Sebastian, attending family therapy to address the long-standing patterns that had contributed to this situation. "So you're using our crisis as leverage to force therapy on us," my father said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "No, Dad," I replied. "This is about setting healthy boundaries while still offering help." My mother took the phone, tearful, but with the familiar edge of manipulation. Held firm. "Those are my terms. You can accept them or seek help elsewhere." After a long silence, my father agreed to consider it, asking if I could at least send information about solicitors. I agreed and waited. 9 days later, my mother called again, subdued and resigned. "We would like to accept your help. And we'll do the family therapy if that's what it takes." The following Saturday, I flew home for the first time in over a year. My parents' house looked smaller than I remembered, the once immaculate lawn now showing signs of neglect. My mother answered the door looking aged and haunted in a way I had never seen before. My father, once robust and authoritative, now seemed diminished. Sebastian was notably absent, at a friend's, my mother explained vaguely, though I suspected he was avoiding the confrontation. I noticed with a pang that my law school graduation photo, once displayed out of obligation, had been removed from the mantel entirely. My father cleared his throat and outlined the legal strategy his solicitor had proposed, both parents visibly relaxing into the familiar comfort of discussing Sebastian's needs. When he finished, I leaned forward. "Now that we've covered the legal aspects, we need to discuss the family therapy component of our agreement." The tension in the room thickened instantly. "Is that really necessary?" my father asked, dismissive. "It is not only necessary, it's non-negotiable," I stated calmly. "I have arranged a consultation with Dr. Bennett, a family therapist. Our first session is tomorrow morning." "This isn't about punishing you," I clarified, seeing the defensiveness in my father's posture. "It's about healing patterns that have hurt all of us, including Sebastian." His current situation did not happen in isolation. My father flinched at the word enablement, but did not argue. My mother dabbed at her eyes. "We've always loved both of our children," she said, her voice wavering. "We never meant to hurt you, Amelia." "I know you believe that, Mum," I responded gently but firmly. "And that's something we'll explore in therapy. Intent and impact are often very different things." As I prepared to leave, my father surprised me with a question that revealed perhaps the first genuine curiosity about my experience he had ever expressed. "Were we really so terrible to you?" I paused at the door, considering my response carefully. "You were wonderful parents to Sebastian," I said simply. "I just needed you to be wonderful parents to me too." The therapy session the following morning was as difficult as I had anticipated. Sebastian attended, sullen and defensive, clearly there only because of the leverage I held over his legal situation. Dr. Bennett, an experienced therapist with a calm, authoritative presence, recognized the dynamics immediately and established ground rules for our ongoing work together. Over the next several weeks, I consulted regularly with Sebastian's solicitor, providing insights on strategy. In court, Sebastian eventually accepted a plea deal that included restitution to his victims, a significant fine, and 2 years of house arrest with 5 years probation. He avoided prison time primarily due to the skill of his solicitor and his agreement to cooperate with authorities investigating larger financial crimes in the cryptocurrency space. A small, almost comic footnote to the whole ordeal being that the crypto guru, who'd promised investors the moon couldn't, according to his own solicitor, actually explain what a blockchain was when questioned under oath. In therapy, progress was slower and less linear. My father, in particular, struggled with the suggestion that his parenting had been anything less than exemplary. The breakthrough came nearly 3 months into our sessions, during one focused specifically on my experience of growing up as the less favored child. With Dr. Bennett's guidance, I described several pivotal moments from my childhood, speaking not in accusation but in a sincere effort to help my parents understand the cumulative impact of their choices. As I spoke, I watched my mother's face crumple with a recognition I had never seen before. "I had no idea," she finally whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I never saw it that way. I thought you were the strong one, the independent one who didn't need us the way Sebastian did." In the sessions that followed, we began the painful process of rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. There were setbacks. My father stormed out of one particularly challenging session, and Sebastian missed several appointments when the discussion became too personally confronting. Yet slowly, incrementally, change began to take root. My mother called me directly, not to discuss Sebastian, but to ask about my work, my relationship with Alexander, my life in Ravenswood. My father, after weeks of resistance, finally broke down during a one-on-one session with Dr. Bennett. In our next family meeting, he addressed me directly with tears in his eyes. "I was wrong, Amelia," he said, his voice unsteady. "I told myself I was being a good father because I provided for you materially, because I pushed you to excel. But I failed to give you what every child deserves: unconditional love and support. I failed you, and I am deeply sorry." The apology was not a magical solution to decades of hurt, but it was a beginning. 6 months after Sebastian's arrest, Alexander proposed during a weekend trip to Loch Ainsley. When I called to share the news with my parents, my mother asked thoughtful questions about our plans and offered to help in any way we wanted, without attempting to take control. My father expressed genuine happiness, and for the first time in my memory, pride in me that was not compared to or overshadowed by Sebastian. We planned a small wedding for the following spring. Throughout the planning process, my parents respected our choices and contributed financially without strings attached. When the day arrived, my father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. During his toast at the reception, he spoke words I had waited a lifetime to hear. "Amelia has always been extraordinary," he said, looking directly at me. "Her intelligence, her determination, her capacity for forgiveness and growth have humbled me. I am more proud to be her father than words can express." Sebastian attended the wedding with his new girlfriend, a grounded, straightforward woman who seemed to expect accountability from him in a way previous partners had not. Our relationship remained complicated, but therapy had helped us begin to relate to each other as adults rather than as competitors for parental attention and resources. The journey of healing our family has been neither quick nor easy. There have been difficult conversations, painful recognitions, and moments of backsliding into old patterns. Yet the honest foundation we have built has allowed for something I never thought possible: a relationship with my parents based on mutual respect rather than performance and approval-seeking. I no longer measure my worth by their validation. The confidence and self-respect I fought so hard to develop have become integral to who I am, regardless of external affirmation. And paradoxically, it was only when I stopped desperately seeking their approval that a healthier relationship became possible. If you have ever felt like the less favored child, if you have spent years trying to earn love that should have been freely given, I want you to know that your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to value you properly. The healing begins when you recognize that the problem was never you. Have you experienced favoritism in your family? How did you handle it? Please share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to hear more journeys of setting boundaries and finding self-worth. Remember, sometimes the most important family we have is the one we choose for ourselves. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage on your own path to healing.